I'll apologize up front. So a couple people in this room know that we've been fretting over hiring my replacement, and we interviewed our third candidate yesterday, sent him on his way this morning and talked about it, and I've talked with the dean, and I'm hoping that that's successful. So I've been a little preoccupied. I'm a very sort of planning person, and this is not planned at all, so I'm just going to tell you that up front. It may not be my greatest effort, but I hope I can tell you a lot of stories. I left out the Alan Ryle story. I just recalled one for Larry, but I probably won't use that one, so he's safe for the time being. But by the end of the hour or so, you at least know where Pickle Man, the Kimchi Kid, and the other moniker comes from, the Chemistry Man. Just to give you a background, since most of you in this room were not here when, some of you weren't even born when I came here in '77, I was born in Orlando, Florida. The population when I was there was 42,000. Since the mouse has come, it's a lot different. I completed my bachelor's degree at Rollins College, which is just north of Orlando, and then found out that I could go to the University of the Army, and I was drafted, that's what I'm saying, and sent to Vietnam, meant to be an interrogator. I learned Vietnamese, got very good at it, but as only the big green machine could do, they made me a clerk. So I never used Vietnamese. So if you were alive then, your $40,000 of tax money was wasted on me. I settled a few arguments, and that was about it that I could do with my Vietnamese. And all I still remember is how to ask you how many hand grenades you have and where the helicopters are placed. So I don't think that's going to be applicable today. I came back married and went to the University of Florida, finished my PhD there. Went to Baylor College of Medicine intending to be a biomedical researcher, not even thinking about teaching, and had a rather interesting experience there that profoundly affected me. A PhD that I became very good friends with in the adjacent lab, in the lab I was working. I didn't work for him in my research. Had brain cancer, glioma, and John said, I'm teaching this biochemistry course for the physician's assistant program that had just started, and I need somebody to keep the course going until I get back. I thought, A, that was kind of a Randy Pauk, that's one of those sort of confidence that you're going to recover from what is probably one of the worst brain tumors you can have. And John said, I don't know how long it'll be, but I want you to take over the course. And I was kind of flattered and then said, oh my God, what am I going to do? I've never taught this course before. But I ended up teaching it for 6 weeks, and it changed my life. I came here instead of continuing to do research. So that was a good thing for me, and it really was a good thing. I have to start off with one thing, and that is a few little vignettes about how fortunate I was to get to know Arda Walker and Russ Parker and Carolyn Blair, Randy Shields, and I had the fortune of living next door to Art Bushing until he died. My Arda Walker story is interesting, an extremely imposing individual. I had been on the campus 4 weeks, and Bob Naylor, bless his little heart, told me to go to the ALC meeting and propose that organic chemistry be 2 semesters. It was a 1-semester course, and I said, it can't be 1 semester, they need 2 to go to medical school. So he said, fine, write it up and send it to the ALC, and Arda Walker, sitting at the head of the table, I think it was in the library, and said, who are you to add to the chemistry program when the liberal arts is why we're here? And I thought I defended myself, but I kind of got a little angry, but, you know, 4 weeks, I backed down and said, okay. So I guess that was not going to fly, and I went back to my office, did what I had to do. That night at 10 o'clock, I get a phone call. It said, hi, Arda Walker here. I said, hi, Dr. Walker, what do you want? Because I was about to go to sleep. She said, I understand you're a gardener. I said, yeah, I like to grow vegetables. And we talked about gardening for about an hour. The next day, I see Carolyn Blair. And she said, did Arda call you last night? I said, yeah, we talked about gardening. She says, you're on her good side. It's okay. If she called you and continued to scream at you, then you were on the bad side. So from then on, Arda and I were very good friends. Russ Parker. You had to know Russell to appreciate him. Little goatee, like so. A laugh. Any of you remember the cartoon strip with the dog Precious? You know that guy, the one that laughed like that. That's how Russell laughed. We would go to the faculty meetings, and I learned early on in my life that you sit with your elders, you don't sit with your juniors. You sit with the people who've been there before, and you can learn things from them, even in faculty meetings. So I sat between Russ Parker and Bill Dent on either side of me. And something was said in the faculty meeting, and Russ Parker, who could be the most acerbic wit in the world, made some comment, and then laughed, and then became straight-faced and serious. I continued to laugh. The then president, who was running the faculty meetings in those days, said, just like your elementary school teacher, Mr. Bunde, what's so funny in that back corner of the room? And I went, but he said something. I didn't say anything. So after that, I've learned maybe sitting with your juniors is not such a bad idea if Russ Parker is the one next to you. Carolyn was the dean who hired me. So if there's anybody who still blames me for something, it's her fault. You can do that. But I remember a conversation with her. I was coming out of a situation of doing research, not really thinking about tenure, teaching, and all of that. And I said, you know, Dr. Blair, I have to ask, what happens at Maryville College with tenure? Believe it or not, we had no faculty handbook. We had no tenure policy. And I still remember her. To this day, I can feel her touch, reaching across her desk in Anderson, going, if we like you, Terry, we keep you. So I guess they like me. That's all it was. Randy Shields, by far, you know, a pivotal member of the Maryville faculty, almost in the same vein as Dr. Walker. Randy came to my very first lecture in organic chemistry. I had stayed up all night, practically, it seemed like it, writing out all of my notes for my lecture for the whole week. And in those days, we had a 10-week semester, so you met 5 times a week for 50 minutes. So I had 5 lectures planned. And I come into the lecture hall, I think there were 12 students, and there's Randy sitting in the back corner. Now, let's just say I got a little nervous at that point, so I proceeded to do my lecture. And I went through all 5 days in about 25 minutes. And the students, I mean, after they quit taking notes, they just stare at me, and I realized that when I got to the last page, I still had 20 minutes to go. So I went back through the first one again. And after the lecture, I'm figuring Randy's going to fire me, I'm going to be out on the street, I've got to go tell my wife that I don't have a job, or I had one for about a week. And he comes up and said, a little bit fast on the presentation. And you made 2 grammatical errors that I noticed. But other than that, I think you're okay. And that was it. That's the last time I saw him in a class. He was still chair of the division when he retired. A wonderful human being. A knowledge of the mountains, Cades Cove, and the national park that we lost when he died. And then art. Art story has nothing to do with, there are many I could tell on art. The tomato competition. Of who's going to get the first tomato, his backyard garden or mine. And then I found out that he cheated. He used a plastic sort of dome called the wall of water. You plant this poor little tomato plant in February, and then you put this plastic dome over it, fill it with water so it could keep from freezing the plant when the temperature drops at night, and then the sun focuses light on it so he could get the first tomato. He still doesn't know that I bought mine at Kroger and dropped it on the ground and said, God, it was so big it fell off the plant. Can you imagine that? Mine are only about that big. How did you get it? He never did. I never did tell him how I got the tomato. But yes, there are lots of stories that with art and I and gardening, who gets the first of something. And did I mention 23 students? And I had to find a student who was 21 who could drive a college vehicle. So we take off. And we had an intricate system of flags, as I remember it. A red bandana out the window meant you should stop at the next exit, which turned out to be a very good signal. If you notice the list in the bottom corner here. I think I repaired the transmission once. I put at least 10 quarts of oil in them. I changed, I think it was both alternators and one starter or vice versa. I spent more time under that damn vehicle than I did in it. And we got to Pigeon Key, and we got back, but I looked at Bob and said, never again am I going to take 23 students. We had some incidents like, I know the term city slicker is pejorative and I shouldn't use it, but who in their right mind would drive a tent stake with a 3-pound jar of jelly? Me? And then go, there's ants in my tent. I mean, you know, there's rocks, there's pieces of wood, there's other things you can use. Why use the jelly? Because it was right there and I thought it would work. And just smash 3 pounds of Concord grape jelly all over the tent. So, self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And then, it's not off color, I'll say it the right way. I had Kathy Witt. I wasn't going to use names, but Witso has to get named. Kathy had graduated. She was in the first class that I taught. She's now a PhD nurse and teaches in the nursing program at ETSU. But Kathy was there, and her parents are both physicians, and she came with a medical kit because she was really worried. They were really worried that I was the only faculty member and something might happen. Well, somebody broke a lantern globe from a propane lantern and had the brilliance to put it on the bench that we were eating and picnicking on in between all the tents down in the middle of nowhere in the Everglades. And they were going to play cards at night, and somebody sat on the broken lantern. And it was a shard about like that. I hear this blood-curdling scream, and Kathy grabs the young lady, runs into the ladies' room, and I'm pacing back and forth, knowing it's 45 miles to get out of the park and another 70 miles to Miami. So I'm thinking, what is it? Kathy comes out, said 3 butterfly bandages. It was about this far from disaster. So you read into that how you want to read into it. But I mean, I was about to die in those 15 minutes. So that was an interesting beginning for travel. Oops, it goes this way, idiot. There we go. Oh, skip one, sorry. I got to learn it slower. Go back. There we go. Travel, yes. This is all due to a faculty member who didn't stay at Maryville College, still remains a good friend of mine. Bob Yeager taught physics, came a couple years after I did and said, you like to canoe, I like to canoe, let's do J-term courses on canoeing. So the first one was a kind of modest course to the Okefenokee Swamp. We went out in the swamp, camped, came back, sort of 30 miles. And other than, did I mention the broken starter, broken alternator? I mean, this is a recurring thing in my life, repairing things. We managed to get back from the experience, and it was really quite good, except for the people, again, these city slickers we took, who were looking for the light switch in the biffy, as we'll call it, in the middle of the Everglades. And there's no light switch. I said, do you see any wires going out here? We're surrounded by swamp. Well, I thought they'd at least have a light switch in there at night. So they learned to take a flashlight after that. Well, Bob convinced me that was so good, let's do it again. So we took 22 students, about 8 or 9 canoes, and some of the aluminum canoes we still have are ones I talked the company in Ouachita, Arkansas out of. They sold them to us, I think, for what it cost them to bring them here. And we still have 3 or 4 of them. We had no canoes to take. The first ones, we borrowed people's canoes to go on the first one. And we did a rather ambitious, go across the Okefenokee Swamp, all the way over from Folkestone, over the sill, the dam that holds water in the swamp, down the Suwannee River, all the way to White, Florida, which is about 130 some odd miles. It was ambitious, I might add, and did I mention it was December? And it doesn't snow in Florida. I knew that, but it did on that canoe trip. And people had brought bathing suits and tank tops, figuring it's Florida, it's a vacation in December. So it was, I remember getting out at White Springs and seeing, it's not a good story, 15 of our students had gotten there ahead of us with the canoe. We always followed to make sure we didn't lose anybody. And they're there, and they have this fire going, and they're all over it. And this was in a county park. And I said, where'd you get the firewood? And then I noticed a post coming out of the ground that used to be a picnic table. So they had busted apart the picnic table, and they were trying to thaw themselves out. Now, the only thing that made it more interesting was on the other side of the river was a big limestone bluff, maybe 100, 120 feet tall. And all across the top was a trailer park where retirees who come to Florida during the winter had their travel trailers. and they were lined up about 20 wide in their lawn chairs watching this across the street. And one of them screams out, "Are they with you?" And I thought for a moment saying, "Nope, don't know who they are," because I thought I was going to be charged for the picnic thing. So that was we ended up going to the Boundary Waters with Robert and had a great job later on. I did the Boundary Waters trip. I've always wanted to go to the Boundary Waters, and we had a wonderful experience on that one. So those were fun. I learned a lot from the students. I hope they learned something from me. And then there's the fundraisers. You know, I am a sucker for fundraisers. Just ask any student. Don't tell them now, because they'll be going over to my house and banging on the door. But I don't even remember what the episode on the right, or on your right, was. But it was pie contest. And that's 3 of my chemistry majors blasting me in the face with the pies that, fortunately, the dining hall provided the whipped cream for those pies. And a week later, I was still pulling whipped cream out of my ears when they did that. I believe they referred to that move as the Princess Leia move, with 2 of them on the ears, because the pie plate stuck. But yeah, I still know all their names, and I will get even. And it's even worse because my wife and child came, and if you could see the expression on my daughter's face there on your right, I mean, she talked about that for years. You know, when are you going to have another fundraiser? I can throw a pie in your face. So that's where it comes back. Now, I know you're still wondering about the kissing the pig. It's a Chad Berry story. Some of you may remember Chad. Chad had a contest where you put money in a jar, and whoever had the most money in the jar had to kiss a pig. Well, it came down to Chad and I. There were about 5 people and some students besides. And there was like $45 in both of our jars. So I, thinking I was really clever, waited for the countdown for about 30 seconds, grabbed the $10 bill, ran over and shoved it into his jar. Behind me comes Chad Berry shoving a 20 in mine. That's why I had to kiss the pot-bellied pig. By the way, they have really bad breath. Just want to let you know that in case if they ever ask you to be the fundraiser. And then there's these. My favorite. I still have them, as a matter of fact. These were the doggy slippers. And you talk about being set up. I'm still basically naive. Obviously, if I kiss a pig, I must be. There were a couple of students, I think organic had about 15 students in. It's always the organic class that gets even with me. So they come to my office before class and said, "We bought you these doggy slippers. We'd like you to wear them to lecture." I'm thinking, there's got to be something here, but hey, they're so honest. So I put the slippers on, and I walked to class. 231 in Sutton, if you're there. So imagine I walk in, and everybody has slippers on. Bunny slippers, kitty slippers, you name it, and they all have their feet up on the chairs when I walk in. I thought that was pretty neat until the momentary second flash, boom, comes from the side. I'm standing there with a piece of chalk in my hand and bunny slippers on, and that went viral, as we say on the internet, the picture of Bunde lecturing in doggy slippers. So I was had on that one and didn't realize it. The same person who did that is there on the left, Carla Beard. Carla is now a PhD marine biologist. She and her husband, John Heidelberg, run the UCLA Marine Biology Station at Santa Catalina Island. It's a terrible life. To live on the island, watch the whales go by your front door, and have to stay on that island the whole day and teach your classes over the internet at the UCLA campus. But Carla is a local girl. She's from Maryville. And she's on the one on the left. The one on the right is her roommate, and the one in the middle was her then boyfriend. And I started recycling with my daughters to teach them good earth-friendly things way back before that was things to do. And that's how they made their allowance. They would collect aluminum cans, we'd go to Alcoa and sell them, and then they got to keep the money. So I had a box, a huge cardboard box in front of my office saying, "My daughters would appreciate you putting your cans in here." And then every Saturday we take the cans and sell them. I come to my office on Monday morning, and that was the door. This marvelous little door right here. Those cans were hot glued to my door. Now, they did a brilliant job because they sort of put a piece of wood over the top so I could get the key in and open the door, and all the cans would stay on the door when I opened it. Now, when my daughter came that week, I wanted her to see it. She's trying to pry the cans off the door and saying, let's go recycle them. You know, this was, she just thought they were supposed to be there. I don't know how long they worked on that. But it stayed on my door for about a week until they started falling off, and then I peeled them all off. And then I got about a week later, they ballooned the front door saying, you can't read what's written on there, but you really like that we do this, or something to that effect. So I never knew when I came in what to expect. And that leads me to my favorite story. If you read the Echo article, I apologize to you because I have to tell this one. Only because the perpetrators are a high school chemistry teacher and 2 MDs here in town. I mean, that's the best part about it. And they have never confessed. I go to one of them as a physician, and he's never confessed, and nobody has ratted anybody out, even though I know who they are. But I come in, picture this. I had a quiz that morning, Monday morning. I come into Sutton, and Yvonne Long, who was our housekeeping staff in the building, Yvonne comes up to me and said, I can't get in upstairs to clean anything. The doors won't open. So at that point, it became more than imperative for me to get in to the second floor, turn my office light on, because all the perpetrators and their multitude of friends lived in Pearson's. Pearson's was the science dorm in those days, the geek dorm. So they could look out at Sutton and see that my light wasn't on. We don't have a quiz. So I go downstairs to Debbie Threadgill's office, get all the tools I needed, knock the pins out of the door, and the door still won't move. So I figured this is not good. So I then got a screwdriver, went down, got a screwdriver, and took the frame off the door. You see the screws. Took the glass out, didn't break anything. So I want to make sure I didn't have to answer to Rick or Andy. So I took the glass out, and I looked through the hole, and there's the aircraft cable. You still see. I have it so they can ask for it back. That's why I kept it. The aircraft cable was wrapped around both of the kick bars to the doors on the inside, and a come-along was used to tighten it up, and they had helium-filled balloons to float it so it didn't sag, so they could really get it tight. And they've done that on both sets of doors. So, brilliant. Well, before I got to the door, I thought I could go home and get my 28-foot extension ladder. I live across the street, bring it back, and get on the roof and come down through the penthouse, because I know they don't lock that. Had I done that, they had that door blocked with 2x4s to make sure I couldn't get in if I came in. Now, had I done that, it wouldn't be quite as amicable as I am now about it, because I would have killed them. Because I'd hauled the thing over here, got up on the roof, and then found out I couldn't get in. So I went down, got a hacksaw, reached through the door, and cut the aircraft cable. Did I mention I knocked the pins out of the door? So you get the image, right? I'm standing on a chair, not unlike those you're sitting on, and the door starts coming back at me. And for a moment, I thought I was going to ride that damn door all the way down the steps until I got to the little turnaround and put my head through the little bars at that moment. John Nichols came up and said, what are you so excited about? And grabbed the door before it knocked me off the chair. Because I really didn't have a good plan B at that point. I didn't know what I was going to do. So we got the door, I put the pins back in it, opened it up, turned on my light. 31 minutes from the time that I got there and found out that it was locked down, my light was on, and I could see their disappointment. And about 30 minutes later when they walked in, but nobody said a word. And I've offered those come-alongs back. I know where they got them. They took them from Bruce in Mountain Challenge, but he never asked for them back. I don't know whether he ever missed them, but I still have them. There's 2 come-alongs that are still at my house waiting for them to come in and say, yeah, we did it, we want them back, we'll take them back to Bruce. But that wasn't going to happen, I know. And then, in my youth, my foolish youth, I decided intramurals was a great thing to do. And I convinced, I'm 30 years old, I was in reasonable shape, said, let's play softball, let's play volleyball, let's get all these teams, and not flag football, I'm not that stupid. But, and the more I thought about it, it sounded like a great idea to get some of the faculty on campus, and I had Dave Cartledge and Bob Ramger and Jerry Waters and Bill Dett and John Nichols, all of us played on the volleyball team. And then I started thinking, these are the same students I'm giving F's and D's to. and I'm arming them with a volleyball with my face right in front of the net. And, you know, if they hit the net, it's okay with them as long as my face is quickly followed by the net. So I said, this really isn't a really healthy thing to do. So I realized if you're going to be a volleyball team, you have to be competitive. I'll get around to emotional rescue in a minute. And I would always recruit one student, one international student. The first student was a chemistry major from Ecuador who played on the high school Olympic team from Ecuador in volleyball. Carlos Zambrano. Brilliant move on my part. We won intramurals both years he was there. Then we had students showing up from the Middle East, and primarily from Iran in those days, before the fall of the Shah. And one was Abba Shivari, who had played high school volleyball and was on his national high school team. And we won 2 more years, and then he graduated. And then I had to find somebody else, and we had a large contingent of Japanese students, so I convinced Mark Kishimoto, who I want to point out, I had a brilliant plan. He was the only Japanese student who was dating an American girl. All the rest of them were dating each other, so I figured, this guy's going to want to play on our team because she'll help us get him to play on the team. And he did for 2 years. He was a math major. He now runs the Benihana restaurant chain for the whole Southeast. But Mark played for 2 years, maybe 3 years with us, and we never lost intramurals in those times. But then, you know, people started getting old and arthritis kicked in, and I gave it up, and it's never been picked up. But it's a lot of fun. It gives students, honestly, a chance to drive a ball into you and get even for that deed that they think you gave them, but they really earned themselves. But then, about 2 years later, Jim Pickens came to me and said, we want to have this emotional rescue softball team. Well, I love to play softball. I love volleyball and handball more, but I love to play softball. I played on the church team until I couldn't do it anymore. And all of a sudden, the people that they were signing up for this team, let's put it honestly, I knew they weren't athletes. They were great students, but I didn't see a lot of athletic prowess. And I thought, you know, I'm happy to win, but I don't like to lose. So you notice the 3-27, that was our 3-year record. The only 3 games we ever won each year were against the football players. We took great pleasure with that. The emotional rescue comes from the fact that we would have somewhere in the middle of the game a fall down drill. And we'd take our gloves off, put the ball down, lay down on the grass, and look up at the sky until the umps would come up and say, you got to get up and play. Sometimes it was 5 minutes, sometimes it was 10, sometimes it was a minute if they were really impatient. And somebody could call fall down drill. Well, that softball's in my office, and if you ever come by, I'll tell you all of the people who are on there. There are 4 pastors on that ball that played on the team. There's about 6 or 7 that are PhDs in psychology and chemistry and other places. So it was really fun, and we still talk about it. Ed the Bear Brewer came back and talked about playing on that team. It was one of those where you never have to worry, hence the picture of me on the lower right-hand side that, you know, you could swing for the fence, because if you struck out, nobody was going to say a thing, and you might have a fall-down drill right after that. And then, I wasn't going to put this story in, but I have to. It doesn't involve somebody from Maryville College, but it involves an icon of Maryville College. This is the picture of Fairweather after it burned, on the left, one of the pictures I took. Very sad to see that building go down. Maryville College hired a deconstruction company to take the building down and haul it away from Knoxville. The gentleman who ran the crane with the wrecking ball, I've had this conversation with Rick a couple of times, was the funniest human being I think I've ever met. You know, I walked up to him and asked the dumb question. So, you know, how hard is it to learn how to operate this crane? He said, there's only one rule. Don't let the big ball hit the crane. That's all you got to worry about, and especially not the cab if you're in it. So I walked away, laughed at him, and said, yeah, it's a pretty obvious answer. The next day, I'm going to get my mail, and he's sitting there under, the building was down, and all the rubble was there, and they were hauling it away in trucks, one right after the other. And he had found a desk in the debris and had it under the tree, right closest to the parking lot, closest to Bartlett. And he had a telephone with the wire burned off of it sitting on the desk. And he had his feet up on the desk in a chair that had been slightly scorched. And I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "It's my office." And he said, "You want to see something funny?" I said, "Yeah." "Watch this." So he goes out, takes a handful of quarters, throws them out into all of this debris. I mean, it's bricks and wood, charred pieces of carpet. And he goes, "Just watch what's going to happen. Sit down in my chair." So I sat there, and he goes to the first 3 truck drivers come up, and he said, one of them goes, "There's a quarter." He says, "Yeah, guys, I think I hit a safe with the wrecking ball, and I haven't found anything." And 12 truck drivers, the truck stopped, they're in this god-awful debris, digging around, and "I got one, I got one." And he walks back over to me and sits on the edge of the desk and said, "It's been good for about an hour." He said, "Come back tomorrow and I'll throw 50-cent pieces and see how much we can get him to do." I thought I was going to die. I mean, it's just, nobody ever thought that they were being had because they kept finding quarters, you know. I might have hit a safe. So even in tragedy, there's some humor if you make it out of it. That's what I learned from him. And then I have to go to why I'm really here, and that is the students. This picture is one of our graduating classes, and I apologize, I'm going to move, so I'm going to take this with me, so I'll just tell you that. Come on, maybe I will, maybe I won't. This young lady right here, Valerie Malabon, is one of those students you never forget. Valerie was elected to the Outstanding Senior for her year. She came to Maryville College as a 20-year-old. She had immigrated from Laos with her father and sister, who also is a Maryville graduate, not speaking a word of English and being 13 years old. In another 7 years, she was valedictorian of her science high school, Magnet High School in Nashville, and came to Maryville College as a presidential scholar. Absolutely the most motivated and driven human being I have ever met. And also the most devoted person to what she was here for, and that is to get an education. Spoke perfect English. And this was her graduating class on the left. And I just want to point out, I'm going to go across, I'm not going to give you names. Valerie has an MD and a PhD. The PhD is from the University of Memphis, and the MD is from the Pritzker School of Medicine at the University of Chicago. I probably have to tell you that the Pritzker School, if you go to the sort of rating of medical schools, is 4th on the list nationally as the best medical school in the United States. She's doing research right now at Vanderbilt University, which is where she came from. But if you go across, that young lady on the left didn't graduate from Maryville College. She transferred. She has a PhD in chemistry from the University of Texas and teaches there now. The one right there is the president's daughter-in-law, our former president's daughter-in-law, and she has a PharmD degree and is a pharmacist. That's Christy Kanish. She looks like a student, but she actually was my fellow faculty member. The young lady over there just finished her medical training at the University of Tennessee. This young lady's in pharmacy school right now. She took a while to come to that. This one is a MD graduate. That's the Benton Ham's oldest daughter. And she's now in psychiatry, doing her residency in psychiatry. Let's see, across the back. I'm going to tell you more about Melanie in just a minute. Melanie has a PA degree and is an orthopedic PA. The young man next to her is a MD practicing across the street with Maryville Orthopedic, and the young lady there is a pharmacy graduate. It was an absolutely incredible class, to say the least, and wonderful students to teach. And I often look at that picture. Okay, is there a trick to this? That one, yes. Sorry to do that to you. But we go on. And I want to tell some stories about students because that's why I'm here. And they're the ones, I mean, all of you make impressions on us all day long, but the students are really why I show up every morning at 7 o'clock to teach and get anxious to teach at 8 o'clock every morning. Melanie was the young lady on the right-hand side. I hope I can get through this story without cracking up, because usually I can't. Melanie came here to play volleyball. She was one of Candy's students. A pretty good student, not an A student, but a pretty good student, hard worker. She wanted to go to medical school. couldn't do well enough on the medical college achievement test to get in. So I always talk to students when I advise them about health science careers to have plan B. What's plan B if plan A doesn't work out? Probably should have had that with that door, right? I should have thought of plan B with the door before I took the pins out of it. But she said, I just want to do something with people. And I said, nursing? No, I don't want to be a nurse. What about physician's assistant? And we had one student go through a physician's assistant program at Emory a couple of years before and was doing very well. And I said, have you thought about that? She said, yeah, I'll look into it. So she looked into Emory's program, which is very, very good, and found out that she had to work 600 hours in healthcare, either volunteering or working, before she could even send an application in. So she comes back in my office stomping her feet. I can't do this. I said, sure you can. Just get a job at a nursing home, at the hospital, get a phlebotomy job drawing blood, do just working as an office receptionist for some physician here in town. I can't do that. I said, then you want to be a PA. It's okay with me. Then find something else, because that's my plan B for you. Well, she comes back and said, will you call somebody at a nursing home? So I called the nursing homes for her, and they said, sure, we'll be glad to have an orderly. We always need orderlies in the nursing homes. End of the first week, I'll cut the story short, she comes back and said, I can't do it. I can't wipe butts, I can't empty bedpans, I can't do this, I can't feed people. Said, I guess you don't want to be going to healthcare then, because you got to see both sides of healthcare. Well people don't show up, sick people show up. So I said, 2 more weeks, that's all I asked. So the whole summer, I never saw her. Never came back at the end of 2 weeks. At September, she had applied to Emory. I got her letter in for her. She shows up, tears running down her eyes. We both were crying before it was over with. She said, I can't leave them. They don't want me to leave. They're calling me their granddaughter. And I've got Mr. So-and-so and Mrs. So-and-so. Said, you made a wise decision, didn't you? Well, yeah, I guess I did, but I have to leave us. Go back. And she's doing PA gerontology. She's working with elderly patients. And it was one of those where you have to convince somebody that that's really what they want to do. And she is a great success story. She's very successful. And probably the one student that I'll never forget is Kevin. Kevin came from Heritage High School. And you know, we all talk about students who aren't prepared for Maryville College. Kevin had a learning disability and was shunted, literally shunted, into the vocational education program for auto mechanics. He was a great auto mechanic, not a particularly strong student. He took freshman English 3 times. That was the first course. He took the English composition course 2 times. He took introductory chemistry twice. By the time I saw him in organic as a junior, and then working with him on his senior thesis as a senior, and he was a fifth year senior, he started talking about, I'd like to go to graduate school. I really want to teach. And I'm thinking, yeah, right, that's just what we need. You know, you had to work so hard to get here. Why don't you just be happy with what you've attained? I'm looking through him and at him, not thinking with him. And he said, no, I really want to do that. So I said, all right, you've done a senior thesis in this area of organic chemistry. Why don't you apply to the PhD who created this area of organic chemistry at the University of North Dakota? I didn't think he'd do it. He applied. They accepted him provisionally, they told me, based on my letter. He got a master's degree, went and got a PhD, and he's teaching at a university and doing research. His mother sent a letter to Gerald. I hope the letter is still there in the office somewhere. And said Maryville College was the only place that thought he had that potential. Because the high school teachers didn't. They put him in vocational ed. And you all did, but he had to convince himself. He knew he could do it. He just had to convince you that he could do it and could get there. And I've seen him twice since he left. He's got a very successful career teaching chemistry and doing research in chemistry. And to think how far he came from the first day on the campus until the day he graduated was absolutely remarkable. And then John and Carla, I've already told you John and Carla's story about sometime in the middle of their career here at Maryville College. The president gets a phone call from the mayor of Maryville. and said, "Is there any reason why the college is flying the Jolly Roger pirate flag over Anderson Hall?" And, you know, the president, just like Tom, would go, "I don't know what's up there, so no, I don't know that." You know, this is where Andy Luter and his crew line up the usual suspects, right? We know who this is. It's got to be somebody who's fearless enough to crawl up on Anderson, crawl out on the slate roof, pull the American flag down. They folded it just like a Boy Scout, I might add, and then put up the Jolly Roger. And, you know, oh my God, access to Anderson at night. How did this happen? All of these sorts of things. I can tell you who it was. It was John Heidelberg. The person you would least suspect of doing anything was the person who did it. And that's why, sort of why he did it. Just to say that, you know, they were shaking people down. I'm sure there were lineups, there were, you know, all sorts of things in student development to find out who that one person was that flew the Jolly Roger. I can tell you who it was. He just thought it would be something he should do once. He'd never done anything bad at Maryville College, so he thought he would do it one time. And then he and Carla, he went on to, both of them got their PhD from the University of Maryland. And John went to work with Celera Genomics, one of those genetic sequencing companies. He probably is the only Maryville College graduate who has his name as the first author on a paper where he sequenced the Vibrio cholera organism, did the complete gene sequence of it for Celera Genomics when he was employed there. Now, there were 20 other people whose names were on that paper, but he wrote it and he did most of the research. And that is a pivotal paper in terms of finding a way to fight cholera all over the world. Do it in a smart way rather than using drugs to treat symptoms. We find a way to stop the bacteria from growing in the gut of somebody who's exposed to it. So John took that experience and went on over to at UCLA, and he and Carla got joint appointments in UCLA in their marine biochemistry program, and then were asked to be caretakers of the Marine Biology Institute. I have a very short bucket list, but that's one place that's on my bucket list to get over there. As long as I don't have to ride the boat driven by John. John is dyslexic. I rode in a motorboat with him one time. He's one of those people who drives the motorboat looking at the motor instead of looking where you're going, and never quite masters that you turn it one way to turn the other way. And I kid Carla to this day. I said, "You go back and forth from the mainland out to the island, and it's their boat you're driving?" He says, "Well, no, I usually pilot the boat because John's really not that good at parking it or avoiding whales or other boats." So he still has that problem with him. And then, because international students have played such a big part in the 35 years I've been at Maryville, in 1984, we opened our doors with 420 students. I'm not proud of the fact that I started looking for a job that year because I didn't think Maryville College was going to be open the next year. And we had one chemistry major for 2 years, and it was Adil Omar bin Putra from Malaysia. Adil had come from Malaysia in a program with the government to train high school chemistry teachers who could teach in English. If you're not familiar with Malaysia, Malaysia has a language identity problem. They have people who speak Chinese, who speak Malay, and who speak several other dialects of those two languages. And they can't talk to each other. English is still used too because of the British influence in Indonesia. So as a result, they just don't have this identity and figured we're going to use English as our language of instruction. So they sent Adil and about 30 other promising high school chemistry students to the United States, and he wound up at Maryville College. The only student from Malaysia at Maryville College. Was actually a wonderful student. The first Muslim student I'd ever taught. And I remember on the Boundary Waters trip with Robert Bonham, Adil went on that trip. And we had this discussion. We were using soy-based ham and soy-based ground beef because we had to take it in backpacks without refrigeration. And Adil and I had this discussion, being a vegetarian, was it okay for him to eat something that clearly came from vegetables but tasted like ham? Could he even eat it because he can't eat pork? And we had long discussions about whether this would be okay religiously, like I knew whether it would be okay. And the imam was not available for him to ask, so he made his decisions on that trip based on that. That may have been the only pork substitute he'd ever eaten in his life. But he went on Went back to Malaysia. Now he's trained to be a chemistry teacher and would have been a good one. The program's gone bust. New government, no idea, he has no job. He had a promise of a job. He is now an estimator, a tonnage estimator. I had the fortune to go to the Soviet Union in the early 1980s with the World Council of Churches as a Presbyterian church delegate, and it was a sort of life-changing experience. I could tell thousands of stories about that. There were 380 of us, and we were evenly divided between pastors from churches in the World Council and from lay people. And we were hosted by the Russian Orthodox Church. So we got to go to some absolutely incredible churches. One side of me is thinking, this is the Soviet Union, why am I in a church? Why is there a church? And who are these people? They're obviously communist plants. And I went through that whole experience, had an amazing experience. I actually preached at about 13 different churches after I came back wanted to know about that. And I did a sermon called Onion Domes and the Other Faith, because it is truly remarkable. I have one experience that I'll share with you. We were in Zagorsk, which is the sort of home seminary and church for the Russian Orthodox Church. It's outside Moscow. And if you're not familiar with the Orthodox Church, a true Orthodox Church, a Russian Orthodox Church, there are no pews. You stand up for the whole service. And the services last 2.5 hours. So you know, military training, I knew not to lock my knees. So of all the people who were there were about 60 of us at that time at this service. I was the only one that stood up for the whole thing. I just made a point that if that Russian grandmother, the babushka in front of me, was standing up, I was going to stand up. So I stood up for the service. At the end, we were going back to talk to the priest. And this woman comes up and grabbed my thigh. And I mean, literally almost knocked me off my feet. And it was one of the little Russian grandmothers standing in the front row. She grabs my thigh and squeezes it. I'm assuming what she said in Russian was iron legs or something to that effect. But that obviously made an impression on her that I stood up for the 2.5 hours. I thought about sitting down a lot, but I kept looking at her and I wasn't going to sit down until she did. But it was an amazing experience. And that little side of me saying the Russian plants, we ended up in Armenia and were hosted by the Armenian Orthodox Church. And we were in a church. We had met with the Russian Peace Committee, which is the Communist Committee, and they were telling us how peaceful the Soviet Union was and how they weren't really interested in world domination, and this was all a sort of plot by the West to undermine their country and their own sovereignty. And I'm listening to all this, yeah, blah, blah, I've heard this before. So then we go to church that night, and they had children lined up to be baptized. And there is the same Russian delegate that was following us around with his grandson. And he spoke fluent English. So I walked up and I said, but this afternoon you were a communist. He said, this is my grandson. I'm here for his baptism. I'm not a communist when I walk through that door. So I found out that there's a little bit of humanity in that, in the way people see that. And then there was the wonderful trip to Korea. Because there's quite a few of you here who haven't heard this, I asked Sam if I could do this, and he gave me permission. We went to Korea in 1992 because of our relationship with Hanam University in Daejeon. And they had sent students to Maryville, but we had no students going back. And the exchange was getting kind of lopsided, so they said, we'll take faculty members. So Youngbae Kim organized it. He was our political science professor, many of you know. And then Scott Brunger went, and Susan Ambler went, and Sam Overstreet, and good old me, go on this trip to Korea. And we went everywhere for those 3 weeks. We taught in English in classes. Sam taught English. I was teaching organic chemistry. And I will admit, given all of my stories, there is something to be said. I still may wind up in either Vietnam or Korea teaching for a year. I'm still hoping to do that. But when you come into a room, in an Oriental classroom, all the students jump and bow until you sit down. I could get used to that, I'll be honest with you. But the other thing I didn't know is they don't ask questions. Because if they ask a question of a professor, it means that the professor, it didn't explain things to them properly, and therefore they're impugning the professor, so they won't ask questions. Well, I am really big on cultural faux pas. So after I found out that they wouldn't ask me any questions in class, in the organic class I taught for a week, I said, I've seen that you go to this bar across the street, Student Dive across the street. I said, I'll be there at 5 o'clock this afternoon for 1 hour, and I'll buy the beer. Feel free to come over there. And I had 20 of them. And we talked about everything. I go back that night to go to dinner with the faculty members in the chemistry department at Hanam, and it's a little icy at that point, because I wasn't supposed to do that, but I've learned an awful lot about their students and about their attitude about higher education. Tom's job would be solved if we acted like a Korean university. When you apply to a Korean university, there are 40 slots in every department. First come, first serve. You may be the best English speaking and want to be an English major, but if it's plugged up, you're a physics major, because they had an opening. If you wanted to be a history major and that was closed, you're a math major. But what amazed me is their students are so well prepared in high school, they can be any major. They have the background to do that. But it was interesting to talk to those students. Well, while I was there, I'll have to put my glasses back on. While I was there, I started out and sort of got the name after the first day. I like kimchi and I happen to like hot food. So I said, he came to Korea with his chopsticks in his hand, and the next was Sam Overstreet. For about 12 straight nights, he wrote this poem and added to it every day all the things that we did. So if you will allow me, if I have time, I still have time, I will read it to you. He came into Korea with his chopsticks in his hand, looking for the hottest food offered in the land. Everybody gave him all the kimchi on their plate and watched with sheer amazement as voraciously he ate. Flames flew from his mouth and fire sparkled in his eyes, but the women of the dining hall betrayed no surprise. They chuckled with amusement, piled more kimchi on with pride, but the great kimchi kid took it easily in stride. And then the refrain that will be repeated. Oh, Susan of the spas drinks beer with the best, that is Susan Amber. And everyone drinks ginseng, but for manhood, the real test is not consuming octopus or sucking on dry squid. No, it's scarfing down more hot stuff than the famous kimchi kid. Now, Overstreet, whose name in Korean is Kilgana, was first to give a lecture, and he gave it quite a go. He portrayed the great Achilles throwing down the royal shaft, but his Rambo imitation was what made the students laugh. Oh, Susan of the spas drinks beer with the best, and everyone drinks ginseng, but for manhood the real test is not consuming octopus or sucking on dry squid. No, it's scarfing down more hot stuff than the famous kimchi kid. Oh, the Sukaram grotto sits atop a mountain high, and at dawn when the rising sun illuminates the sky, the forehead of the Buddha radiates reflected light and strikes the hearts of tourists with thrill of pure delight. Before the hour of dawn arose a small crew full of drive, sworn to hike to Sokaram or not be found alive. There were old John Somerville, the host, the students Pak and Beth, Rambo Kilgano and Bunger, and the man with kimchi breath. I really like that one. Poor Beth and Brunger got up late, the others just began. But they did more than hike the trail, by Jove, they almost ran. They raced right up the steep ascent and through the black of night, guided only by the kimchi kid's little pin light. They were halfway up the mountain, making record-breaking time, when Rambo started sucking wind and lagging far behind. He huffed and panted, and in general made a lot of noise, and finally sat down and said, "Go on with me, without me, boys." They left Kilgano in the dust and pressed on to the peak. Then moments later, he arrived looking pale and weak. Beth and Brunger soon came in, behind but not far, and last came young Bae Kim with those who rode up in the car. You have to know Young Bae to appreciate that. What made these three great champions get to Sukaram so fast? Were they favorites of the Buddha, reincarnate from the past? Pak is young and strong, and Somerville old and wise, but some say jet propulsion helped the Kimchi Kid to rise. And oh, Susan of the Spas drinks beer with the best, and everyone drinks ginseng, but for manhood the real test is not eating octopus or sucking on dry squid, it's scarfing down more hot stuff than the famous Kimchi Kid. Our heroes toured cooperatives, a dam, and then a farm, drank pumpkin juice and ate fresh grapes, oblivious to harm. When they concluded there was nothing they couldn't lick, the Kimchi Kid and Kilgano both started feeling sick. Oh yes, it did hit that way. Kilgano missed a meal that all the others ate with glee. That night the Kimchi Kid required Imodium AD. The next day no one ate much, only Brunger still stood tall, while the kid and all the others knew they'd had a mighty fall. That afternoon they made a plan with students to compete at choku, that's like volleyball, with no hands, only feet. On empty stomachs in the hot sun, they labored at the game. The students were polite, but they trounced them soundly all the same. Susan had been eager for the sensual delight of the hot springs, so with Kim Nam-sung, she'd soon gone the previous night. That the women should have gone first to Young Bae was great shame, that he promptly planned a trip for those who lost the choku game. On reaching the hot baths, the men plunged in au naturel. The water ranged from icy cold to hot as Dante's hell. The bubbles felt quite soothing to our heroes in the buff, but who could take it hottest was the test of who was tough. The Kimchi Kid was leaping from one pool into another, quite confident he could take it hotter than his brother. The recommended time had ticked off double-fold when the kid went from the hottest, hot, into the icy cold. The sated heroes showered and passed to the next enclave, a room with mirrors, combs, and ample stores of aftershave. O Kimchi Kid, no more thy fabled manhood didst thou tout, for on the floor of that hotel, alas, thou didst pass out. But in that hour of dire distress, another hero shone, for Young Bae Kim arose and faced the crisis all alone. Without a moment's thought to summon help, Young Bae was gone. He raced through the hotel without a stitch of clothing on. Not once, but twice, the astonished clientele looked on with awe, while Flash Young Bae streaked through the hotel restaurant in the raw. The kid awoke reclining in a room with 3 TVs. The hotel staff persuaded Flash to put on BVDs. Soon everyone went downstairs, ate filet of sole and salad, and reflected that such noble deeds required a fitting ballad. Oh, Susan of the Spas drinks beer with the best, and everyone drinks ginseng, but for manhood, the real test is not consuming octopus or sucking on dry squid. No, it's scarfing down more hot stuff than the famous Kimchi Kid. One fine, you figure that Brunger's been left out, so you're waiting for it. One fine morning, Brother Brunger went out for a jog, but on return, his poor head must have been in quite a fog. He went up to the wrong entry, put the key in someone's lock, and turned it, but it snapped in two, and he felt a sudden shock. For as he looked around, he observed with growing fright TV surveillance cameras filming everything in sight. He felt quite sure that he'd be visiting the police station and that his mugshot soon would be displayed across the nation. Wanted, burglar Brunger. All posters soon would say, known criminal connections, maybe CIA. Though he feared he might be facing a Korean with a gun, the solution was a locksmith and a mere 6,000 won. Oh, Susan of the Spas drinks beer with the best, and everyone drinks ginseng, but for manhood, the real test is not consuming octopus or sucking on dry squid. No, it's scarfing down more hot stuff than the famous Kimchi Kid. It's almost over. I won't belabor this. There's one stanza I have to read. In Seoul, our band decided there was not a day to waste, for there was one Korean challenge they had yet to taste. And ere they mentioned it, they sensed something was wrong, for people seemed quite shocked when they said, "We want Boysen Tom." "Is Dr. Amber going too?" their friend asked with a stare, for Boysen Tom, when viewed by them as just a male affair. The answer, "Yes, she wants some too," left folk looking quite amazed, and thinking these Americans were more than slightly crazed. They had some trouble finding some place that would serve this meal, although they had no problem finding raw fish or cooked eel. But soon in dark alley, just beyond the KFC, they found a place that specialized in Fido fricassee. For Boysen Tom, you see, is not an ordinary meal. It's not like pork or beef or mutton, not like ham or veal. It's not like sausage made from ground-up innards of a hog. No, Boysen Tom is very special. Boysen Tom is dog. The next room was so full of Japanese it was amazing, who drank soju wine as fast as frat boys at a hazing. Their novices saw Susan and broke into smiles and titters, but she chowed Bowser down without the slightest hint of jitters. Of course, while she was eating, she drank soju like the rest, and soon she shared some stories hitherto quite unconfessed. How she and Kim Nam-sung, the week before they were free, had picnicked and drunk rice wine that made soju look like tea. But all our heroes ate and found no harm they could detect, nor did they feel the promised aphrodisiac effect. Only young Bay was seen raising a paw to scratch his ear, and Pilgana might sniff when he saw fire hydrants near. This tale of champions is done, to rhyme on would be dull. There's just one note to sing about what made their hearts so full. Of courage and what motive did their eager minds embolden, doing more Korean things that had been done by Bolden. Oh, Susan of the spas drinks soju with the best. Brunger holds the keys of knowledge, Rambo's wittiest. Flash young Bay runs faster than Camilla ever did, and no one eats stuff hotter than the famous Kimchi Kid. So you know it now too. This is sort of the bookends for me, in the sense that that picture on the left was taken early on when I first came to Maryville, probably about 1980. I found something very interesting as I've gone back through some of the pictures that I have in files, that I can tell what year it is by the color of my beard and how much hair I have. Whether I had the comb over or whether I had the ponytail. So I could kind of document these pictures better than I ever thought I could. But the one on the right was taken the year that Bob became the academic dean, and I assumed the chair of the Natural Sciences Division in 2000. So it was really a kind of watershed for those 25 years that we were colleagues and we were at the chemistry department. And that was taken at his house. Bob started an institution that we still keep going called the Chemistry STEAK out. And we have steak and meet at some faculty member's house for all the students who are declared chemistry majors. And then there was this. I don't think any of you have seen this. Have you seen, I was going to see if Karen had seen it. There was a little-known art professor that I'm sure the art department would just as soon forget. He's still in Knoxville. I won't give you his name. I promised people that I would not use their last name. But Tim drew this cartoon strip for about 5 issues of the Echo, and I didn't have any copies of it. And this was the first issue he put in there, made it a serial cartoon about Chemistry Man and Lab the Wonder Boy. And the real sort of craw, or the rock in Bob's craw, was that he was Lab the Wonder Boy and I was Chemistry Man. And it goes on to chronicle their adventures fighting crime. I wish I could show the second panel, the second set of panels, but it just didn't photocopy it. I need to do something with it because it should have been framed, it should have been copied onto acid-free paper because it's on yellow paper now, so you'll never know how badly decomposed it is. And it was pen and ink. He drew it in ink, and then they reduced it to fit in the Echo. But Tim would come back every week with some adventure that he created for Chemistry Man and Lab the Wonder Boy. But one of them was a villain attacks the dynamic duo, and Chemistry Man pulls a test tube out of his waistband and zaps the person, and it's apparently acid. It burns a hole through the villain and he falls. And Lab the Wonder Boy says, "But you can't do that. That's much too violent for a college newspaper. Get real, Wonder Boy." This is a college audience. They see more violence than that in the first day they're on campus. So that was his sort of comment, social commentary. He still has one of the most memorable senior art shows on the Maryville campus. It was in the old Fine Arts Center. Those of you remember the thing. Any of you remember it? You don't remember it. Yes, Belinda does. It was a series of toilets that he had, shall we say, used for a second purpose and planted flowers in them. Now, the humor was the flowers were geraniums. So you had to kind of, appreciate the sense of humor that he brought to this enterprise. Unfortunately, the art department, I don't believe, ever since caught the sense of humor in his senior art show. But it was the lab or chemistry man was the main part of it. Just a few more stories about my summer. I spent probably summers since 1992 working with Terry Simpson and either Paul Threadgill or Drew Crane doing workshops for middle school, elementary school, or high school teachers, sometimes more than one of the above. And this is a picture early on because you see it's the beard is salt and pepper, and I have the comb over still going there before the ponytail arrived. And this was with some elementary school teachers here in Maryville. And that probably is the second most fun in my career, because we all know how important those teachers are to our students and to your sons and daughters and your grandsons and granddaughters. And I've always thought it was amazing that an 18-year-old will leave a high school where they may have been successful and come to Maryville College and suffer slings and arrows for the first couple of semesters to get on their feet and do something and make something of themselves while they're here. But imagine a teacher who's been told, you're teaching this class, you must know it, and then to come to Maryville College and face me for a week saying, I really need to know more chemistry to be a chemistry teacher, or I need to know more science to be a good science teacher, or I'm an elementary school teacher, I've never had a science class, help me come up with some hands-on activities. And I always thought that was the height of humility, to be able to do that and say that. And I still work with them after the workshops. They call me up and they ask me to come out and talk to their class, and I will continue to do that because obviously I'm very selfish. It's in my best interest to have the best high school chemistry graduates to come into our program. So I want to make sure that those science graduates have a great experience no matter what high school they go to. So these were really a big part of my life every summer. And this is another one of those. We used to do something interesting. I'm glad I walked in early to hear your deliberations. We used to do something rather interesting with the freshmen. We would bring all the freshmen into Pearson's in the afternoon and have faculty members from the various divisions walk around the tables and talk to them. Stop the chemistry person, stop the biology person, stop the English person, stop the person from music, and ask them questions about the major. You've been here for a few weeks. Do you have any questions that we could answer? And this was a table where those two young ladies were sitting. The one on your left is a PhD and has a PharmD and a PhD in pharmacology. And the one on your right is going to be our first college president. She wasn't quite old enough to apply for your job yet, but Jenny is absolutely amazing. One of the most incredible young women I've ever seen. She is now the director of research for the University of Miami. She ran the Damon Runyon Foundation for 8 years as their science director. Terribly motivated, and is absolutely, and she told me when she came to give a talk here to our students, she said, let me know when there's an opening at the Maryville College presidency. I may just apply, because that's where I really want to wind up. Someday, she may. I hope not for a while, though. I'm not suggesting that. But that kind of process, when I found this slide, I kept thinking that, that's something we ought to keep doing, because it gave those students an opportunity to talk to a faculty member outside of class with their buddies and not one-on-one with a faculty member, where many of them still are not comfortable doing that. And it might be a very good thing to go back to. I just say that. And I wouldn't have thought of it had I not seen the picture. We started doing demonstrations years and years ago at the Foothills Mall. And we would take students, train them to do chemical demonstrations in the mall, and you see some of them and the crowd that we had there. The first year, I did my demonstration of the Glowing Pickle, which I will be doing. Once again, I'm going to do a whole series of demonstrations outside on the lawn next spring after it gets warm. One of which is I'm going to do the collapsing can, but I'm going to do it with a 50-gallon barrel. So I'll have to ask permission of both the police department and the security, because it will make a noise you will hear for 2 miles when that barrel collapses. It'll take a while, but it will happen. I have the barrel, I'm all ready to do it. And I'm going to blow up an ostrich egg. And this demonstration is one I have aspired to for years, and I've never been able to do it, because I didn't want to pay $45 for an ostrich egg. Fortunately, Callie Blackford was in my class last year, and her parents raised ostriches and had 100 ostrich eggs. So I have 2 of them in my office. If one's a dud, I got a second one. But I will have to ask permission, because I'll guarantee you will hear it at the Justice Center. And I have a whole series of these demonstrations, and the Glowing Pickle may be one of them. But I was nicknamed by some of those kids the Pickle Man, because I would always do a glowing pickle. Although I've done radishes, I've done onions. You just stick 2 electrodes in it, plug it in the wall, and it turns into a yellow lamp because of the sodium that's in it. You have to soak the turnips and the other vegetables in salt water for 6 weeks before you can get them to work. But a pickle has already got enough sodium in it to work. So I would do that demo. First year, I did the demo. They worked in the big area in the middle of the Foothills Mall where the fountain is, and we had all of our demos around it. This is sort of where that is. And I was down a little bit to the left, right in front of Chick-fil-A. And the manager of Chick-fil-A was very gracious when he said, "Don't light another pickle in front of my store, because all that smoke is blowing in and people are leaving and they're not buying hamburgers." So I haven't done that in the Foothills Mall, but there was another reason we weren't invited back. We also do slime. I was going to bring some for some of you to have for Christmas. You need red and green Christmas slime. Nothing says Christmas quite like that. The slime that you can buy, but we make it in our demonstrations. And the students were making it. What color would you like, Timmy? What color would you like, Lucy? And we put it in a Ziploc bag. And it would be maybe, 25 milliliters of slime, something like that, about that big. And so I gave this slime to 2 young men. They were maybe 6, 7, 8 years old. And I could see the wheels turning. I should have known. I was a kid once. I did things like this. So they take the Ziploc bags and they lay them on the ground right next to the fountain. And then they crawl up on the edge of the fountain, jump off, down on it, and the slime goes all over the windows of the cookie place. I mean, it covered, and where the windows were open, it went all the way to the counter where the stuff was. And after that, the mall asked us not to come back. And so we do our demonstrations at the school instead, where we get less trouble for doing that. But I can still see that mall manager walking out and saying, "Look, I really believe in science. It's not that I want to stifle this. We had hundreds of people showing up for it when we announced it. But he said, man, I can't clean that carpet. It won't come off the carpet from last year, and the guy at Chick-fil-A is still griping about your pickles. So we don't do it there anymore. I've never been asked back again. So much for Pickle Man. I have to do it someplace else. So somebody asked me, and I said it was in the slide. What am I going to do? Well, for one, I will stay involved with the campus. I said that to Tom last spring when I handed him the letter. Or told him about my letter of resignation. I don't plan on walking away from Maryville College. I'll just have more time to do things that I haven't had time to do. I will keep working with KT Week. Where are you over there? I wanted her to know that I'm not going to give up on KT Week at all. I love that way too much to stop doing that. Even if I have to plant trees, and it is the best way to stay connected. And any of the alums in this room that have done it know that. Any of the friends who have done it know that as well. It's a wonderful way to stay connected. And this is how I will stay connected to my graduates as they age gracefully too and show up at KT Week. I will have more time to go to sporting events. So I've already told Virginia and Tom to save me a seat, because I will be there for as many as I can come to, because I simply have not had time with all the other commitments on campus to do that. And I certainly will never forget all of those countless numbers of faculty colleagues and students who've helped me grow into Maryville College when I came here as a 30-year-old. And certainly want to thank all of them. The art walkers of the world for those great late night conversations about growing things in the garden. And I have to say that thank you, because it's staff day. This is the second time I've done this. I did a forensic thing, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago. But I just want you to know I understand that we wouldn't have a college with just faculty members. Wouldn't have much of a college at all, as a matter of fact, because you guys make all the difference. I know most of you because I decided to do that early on. I had parents and working class parents who taught me that when you go someplace, the first 3 people you need to meet are the janitor, the person who does other things, maintenance, repair, and then the person who does the hiring and firing. You need to know all of those. And because they're your colleagues, just like your faculty colleagues, and in many ways, Rick spends a few hours once a month in my office, and I treasure those times. I hope he keeps doing that. I hope he comes across the street on his lunch hour, or goes to lunch with me, because I like to stay connected to people who make this place work. And I want to thank you, because I understand that. And thank you for your time and listening to me tell, I hope, what were somewhat funny stories, and maybe some somewhat serious stories. So thank you very much.